Okay, so welcome to the second part of this classical sociology, and as I said in the last lecture, that this is one science, this is one area of knowledge in which we keep referring back to the original thinkers, because these original thinkers who wrote many centuries ago, they did contribute to a body of knowledge which is as relevant today as it was then, or even in cases where it's not relevant. The new schools that have developed have actually built on these theories that were presented. And the other thing that we did appreciate in the last lecture was that these writers were writing at the peak of modernity, at point in history, which for our convenience we have picked from the year 1750. But this is a time when economic changes are taking place, in the sense that there's a lot of industrialization. Political changes are taking place because there is a lot of democratization, and societal changes or sociological changes are taking place, in the sense that there is secularization. And of course, secularization here does not mean that religion is losing its hold, but the church is being separated from the affairs of the state. That is what we are essentially saying. There are other thinkers who have pointed out that no, there are certain societies where the church actually remained very vibrant, as most um, starkly is visible in American society, where the church remained a force to be reckoned with. However, at the dawn of modernity, there was a definite clash between uh, religion and science. And it is here that all these classical sociologists, they cannot ignore science. They cannot ignore science, because that is the order of the day. But at the same time, at a time when religion is being considered a delusion, and it is going into retreat, they do not try to reduce in any way. That reductive fallacy is not something that stings these sociologists. They take religion for what it is, and they do give religion the place that it deserves. So science is important, so is religion, and here we have the first sociologist, the first thinker, whose name is Auguste Comte, and he is very important because he basically gives us the name sociology. Before him, sociology was basically called the social physics, but it is Augusto Comte who introduces the name sociology. All right, and the first thing that he becomes interested in is this tug of war between science and religion, and he comes up with a most extraordinary theory. He says that religion, first and foremost, does not negate science. In fact, science emerges in a sense from religion, because the scientists in reality have tested certain things that religions have said over time. Let's look at the theory of the earth flatters and the earth rounders. People who said that the earth was flat. So some people, most importantly Galileo, he analyzed that point of view, which at that time was a point of view which was dear to the church. So the point of view came from religion, it was tested by science, and then new wisdom was created from there. So Augusto Comte then is saying that religion is in a sense a source of many of the perspectives that are later on either adopted or rejected, but definitely tested by the scientists. He says another very important and interesting thing. He says that uh, science is not a very strong binding force when it comes to being a sociological phenomenon. It does not bind people together. You look at psychology, uh, a certain thing that you study from the point of view of sociology, and then the same thing is studied from the point of view of psychology, and then the same thing is studied from the point of view of another science. All different sciences diverge. They have their own literature, they have their own approach, and they have their own conclusions about the same phenomenon. So he says that, look, scientific insights do not bring people very close to one another. Okay, though these sciences are definitely derived from religion, but nonetheless, as they progress, they take people apart. Okay, here he introduces another very interesting term. It's called crisis. Now recall what he said in the beginning. In the very beginning, he said that, look, society goes from one stage to another. First, there is the theological stage, then there is the metaphysical stage where the religious beliefs or the superstitions are challenged, and then there is the other positivist stage. He says that, look, if in a society you find some people who stick to the theological approach, and then you find some people who stick to the scientific or the positivist approach, and then there are some people who are metaphysicists. He says that in this situation society drifts in different directions, different groups, different parts of society, they all move in different directions. And when people in different societies move in different directions, they do not reach one point of agreement, and this drifting in different directions is called crisis. Okay, so here crisis is created in society. Okay, please do keep in mind that this person, Auguste Comte, he lived in Paris, and this is a Paris which is coming out of the throes of the French Revolution, and then the Counter Revolution, and then the Napoleonic Wars, and then the things that happened after the Napoleonic Wars, the coming of Napoleon III, and a lot of political crisis. So Paris was in the grip of political crisis, but he looked at this crisis from a sociological point of view. He called it a structural crisis. Okay, the structural crisis is produced in the intellectual realm, the crisis of ideas. Please do keep in mind that Comte is one person who thinks that people move forward when ideas move forward. But what if these ideas are not moving forward in the same direction? When these ideas are drifting in different directions, we get what is called a crisis in the structure of society. Okay, and he presented this theory of crisis in his groundbreaking book, Course on Positive Philosophy. Now, it's very interesting that these ideas about philosophy, about sociology, are coming from a book which is called the book on philosophy. There's another very interesting contribution that Comte is making to the sciences. He says that, look, uh, study of sciences can be divided into six parts. There are six sciences. Out of these, four sciences are the lower sciences. Okay, at the lowest level, he keeps mathematics, astrophysics above that, physics above that, and then chemistry above that. Now, why does he call them the low sciences? They're called the low sciences because in these sciences you move from studying the least complicated first, and then progressively, in a very structured way, you move to the most complex things. It's very interesting. In physics, when you see a phenomenon like a telephone, you don't see the first telephone that was created by Graham Bell. Okay, there is no classical approach in physics. You study from the most state of the art, but when you're studying from the most state of the art, you're still studying the physics phenomena from the very basics. All right, you will not start with Newton's third law of motion and then think about how missiles move. No, that's not what happens in physics. You start from a very basic level. What is force? Then you move to speed, then you move to momentum, then you move to more difficult concepts. I hope I'm going right because I studied physics many years ago. So that same thing happens in mathematics. You do not start with imaginary numbers, you do not start with differential calculus. You start from integers. You start from odd and even numbers. You start from numbers. You start from 1 plus 1. You don't even start from 2 multiplied by 2. It has to be plus first, minus second, multiply third, divide fourth. The least complex first, then progressively to the more complex. That's the quality which is shared in all these. Astrophysics cannot start unless and until you study gravity. Okay, but then you study, there are all sorts of things. There's dark energy which fills the universe. There is gravity gone mad, which are the black holes. But you don't study black holes to begin with. You study gravity. From the very simple, you move to the very complicated. Now, the higher sciences are two: biology and sociology. In this, it is not possible to study the simple first. When you study the human body, you do not become the specialist of the heart first, and then a specialist of the liver, and then a specialist of the lung, and then a specialist of the human body. That's not the way it goes. You first take a degree in the human body in general. You have to study the whole first, and then you zoom into the heart, zoom into the lungs, zoom into the kidneys. Now, the heart is very complicated, and so is the liver. But if these organs are so complicated, then how complicated is the human body overall? You cannot say, I will study the part first and then the more complicated. No, you have to start with the more complicated first, then zoom down to the lesser complicated parts, though they are complicated, but less complicated than the human body as a whole. The same goes for sociology. You cannot study the family first. Now, that's a Comte's view. You cannot study the part first. You have to study the whole first. Okay, and then you can, as I use the word, zoom in and go and study the family, the religious institutions, the media institutions. You can do that. So this is the thought of organism. It's a social thought. Here, Comte is concerned with what contribution the part is making to the whole, not how the whole is supporting the parts. Okay, so you need to first study the overall society, and then see how this society is being supported, and what contributions are being made by the various institutions here. So when he's talking about the contributions of the parts, he's setting the foundation stones of a new school called functionalism, which studies the functions that institutions perform for society. And this inspired another thinker, another sociologist who took functionalism to a new level, and he was a great admirer of Auguste Comte. And this thinker was Emile Durkheim, and we are going to study Emile Durkheim's theory in the next video. All right. Thank you very much indeed. See you next time.